the Bitcoin white paper being read from bitcoin.org. Here it is, the Bitcoin white paper. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system by Satoshi Nakamoto. And then it gives us what looks like his email address, satoshien@gmx.com, and as well as the bitcoin.org website. The abstract. A purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. Digital signatures provide part of the solution, but the main benefits are lost if a trusted third party is still required to prevent double spending. We propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer network. The network timestamps transactions by hashing them into an ongoing chain of hash-based proof of work, forming a record that cannot be changed without redoing the proof of work. The longest chain not only serves as the proof of sequence of events witnessed, but proof that it came from the largest pool of CPU power. As long as a majority of CPU power is controlled by nodes that are not cooperating to attack the network, they'll generate the longest chain and outpace attackers. The network itself requires minimal structure. Messages are broadcast on a best effort basis, and nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the longest proof of work chain as proof of what happened while they were gone. So that is the abstract, and they talk a lot about, if you take anything out of that, the longest proof of work chain is very critical in determining the correct blocks in the correct next block. So yeah. So from the abstract, we move into the introduction. And it says, commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions serving as trusted third parties to process electronic payments. While the system works well enough for most transactions, it still suffers from the inherent weakness of the trust-based model. Completely non-reversible transactions are not really possible, since financial institutions cannot avoid mediating disputes. The cost of mediation increases transaction costs, limiting the minimum practical transaction size and cutting off the possibility for small casual transactions. And there is a broader cost in the loss of ability to make non-reversible payments for non-reversible services. With the possibility of reversal, the need for trust spreads. Merchants must be wary of their customers, hassling them for more information than they would otherwise need. A certain percentage of fraud is accepted as unavoidable. These costs and payment uncertainties can be avoided in person by using physical currency, but no mechanism exists to make payments over a communications channel without a trusted party. What is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust, allowing any two willing parties to transact directly with each other without the need for a trusted third party. I just saw some of the comments in the live stream there. Thank you. I'll get back to you in 1 minute. So transactions that are computationally impractical to reverse would protect sellers from fraud, and routine escrow mechanisms could easily be implemented to protect buyers. In this paper, we propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer distributed timestamp server to generate computational proof of the chronological order of transactions. The system is secure as long as honest nodes collectively control more CPU power than any cooperating group of attacking nodes. I'm going to take one little break here. All right, awesome, awesome. If anyone can give me feedback on how I sound, if you can hear me, I appreciate it. I apologize for my occasional word stumblings. It's later than I would also like it to be. I know it's late for a lot of people around the world, but yeah, we're just gonna get through these. I just read the first page of the Satoshi white paper. um, it talks about, the abstract. It has a title. It's titled "Bitcoin: A Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System." So that's interesting. The word cash is in there. And so they talk about how the longest chain is required to outpace attackers. And they use that expression a couple times in the paper, the longest chain. Right up front, they talk about the longest chain um, being important. And we all know that's kind of not as important as anymore in a proof. There's other ways to do proofs. But this is, the first iteration of this technology. As good as it is, has some flaws with this necessity to keep this record, this ongoing record of longest changes. Thanks, Mother Trucker. I see the thumbs up there. Take that to mean we're doing good. Hope everything's out there. Hope everything is awesome out there in the trucking lanes. So yeah, let's. And another thing in the introduction here, they talk about financial institutions and the inherent costs that I think a lot of people probably don't think about every day, where there's someone misuses your credit card, or a scammer gets your credit card number somehow and uses it to make a purchase. And so then, there's third party mediation required to resolve these issues. And those all come with a cost. And in a purely electronic, in a purely electronic version of cash, without the need for a third party mediator, there could be a lot of cost savings there. He even points out that there's a certain amount of loss that's expected in traditional financial transaction systems. So awesome. Yeah, I heard the story on the news about Yellow Truck going out of business, and a little bit about the background there. And it was sad when businesses end, but hopefully it'll all work out for everybody. But it made me think of Donna, the mother trucker out there, doing all this cool stuff in the trucking lanes, and all those great things that come to our doorsteps. We can thank the truckers and the mother truckers of the world. So, all right. So that was page one. Moving into page two. Gonna get back on track here. Transactions. We define, and again, this is true on TikTok. You can follow me, click some likes. Just tap the screen there to get the likes going. I appreciate those folks who are tuning in. This is a reading of the Epic Cash white paper. All right. And so this is, I believe, from 2009, even though I don't think I saw a date, but I said we're going to stay on track here, so we can probably come back into some of those topics again. I know it was released in 2009. I'm not sure how much development on Bitcoin happened in 2008. But moving into the transactions. So we define an electronic coin as a chain of digital signatures. Interesting. So when you hold a digital Bitcoin, it represents a chain of digital signatures. Each owner transfers the coin to the next by digitally signing a hash of the previous transaction and the public key of the next owner, and adding these to the end of the coin. A payee can verify the signatures to verify the chain of ownership. And then it has this diagram where it shows the transaction. They show three transactions and the individual private keys. And so you have owner 1 private key, owner 2 private keys, and owner 3 private keys. And in transaction in this transaction, owner 1's public key is used in a hash, and owner 0 to add on to owner 0's signature. This is signed by owner one's private key and verified by owner one's public key, and then passed on to owner two's public key, where again it gets hashed, and then owner one's signature comes in, and owner two's private key is mixed with owner two's public key. So to verify and sign, so this whole transaction process always uses that owner's particular public key and private key. So owner one's public key and private key, and owner two's public key and private key, and owner three's public key and private key. These are all going into this action of transacting. Word spaghetti. Yeah, word soup. So, word salad, even. The problem, of course, is the payee can't verify that one of the owners did not double spend the coin. A common solution is to introduce a trusted central authority, or mint, that checks every transaction for double spending. After each transaction, the coin must be returned to the mint to issue a new coin. And only coins issued directly from the mint are trusted not to be double spent. The problem with this solution is that the fate of the entire money system depends on the company running the mint, with every transaction having to go through them, just like a bank. We need a way for the payee to know that the previous owners did not sign any earlier transactions. For our purposes, the earliest transaction is the one that counts, so we don't care about later attempts to double spend. The only way to confirm the absence of a transaction is to be aware of all transactions. In the mint-based model, the mint was aware of all transactions and decided which arrived first. To accomplish this without a trusted third party, transactions must be publicly announced, and we need a system for participants to agree on a single history of the order in which they were received. The payee needs proof that at the time of each transaction, the majority of nodes agreed it was the first received. Moving into the timestamp server. The solution we propose begins with a timestamp server. So they illustrated the problem. They said the problem lies with the traditional models relying on the centralized entity known as a mint, and that it would be ran by a company that's just like a bank. So Satoshi Nakamoto in this next section describes the timestamp server role in a better solution to prevent the double spend and to eliminate the need for a centralized authority. Thank you, Crypto Never Sleeps, and I saw Nick in there. Thanks for checking it out. I'm just reading the Satoshi white paper, the Bitcoin white paper from Satoshi Nakamoto. So just reading some white papers in my last couple live streams, just for anybody who might be driving out there, wants to listen in on, hey, Nick Cryptography, appreciate you, brother. So moving on into this next section in the Satoshi Nakamoto Bitcoin white paper, the solution we propose begins with a timestamp server. A timestamp server works by taking a hash of a block of items to be timestamped and widely publishing the hash, such as in a newspaper or Usenet post. The timestamp proves that the data must have existed at the time, obviously, in order to get into the hash. Each timestamp includes the previous timestamp in its hash, forming a chain, with each additional timestamp reinforcing the ones before it. And then they show a diagram of a hash and a block and items, and sequentially continuing in such a way where each one is timestamped. All right, so yeah, brother, those DeFi exploits, that's the biggest stumbling block for a lot. It's not even always about a rug pull in DeFi. They can also just straight up get hacked, and it's the wild, wild west still, and it's an exciting time to participate in that. Um, Take the good with the bad. It's more good than bad. It's incremental success for cryptocurrency community members all over the place. So, but keeping on with this, yeah, keep discuss amongst yourself, folks, in the chat. I'm all good with that. I promise I will try to check out in the chat whenever I can. But I am gonna primarily be keeping up with this Satoshi white paper reading. So we've covered. We're moving into the fourth section here. The first section they just introduced the premise here, which is basically solution for expensive traditional finance transaction systems. And then they talked about transactions and what happens and what the problem with existing transactions are, whereby they basically, the previous suggested solutions before Bitcoin still involve like a centralized authority or a business to run a mint. And so finally, in section 3, he gets into the solution that involves a timestamp server as a critical part. And now section 4 gets into proof of work, which is another really important part of Bitcoin's solution to previous iterations and previous attempts at digital money. So proof of work, section 4, I'm going to go ahead and read in here to, this is page 3 we're getting into out of 9 pages. All right. And then to implement a distributed timestamp server on a peer-to-peer basis, we will need to use a proof of work system similar to Adam Back's Hashcash. So that's Adam Back. He's referenced all the way back in 2009. Adam Back actually developed Hashcash, as I recall, when he was part of Microsoft. Sorry, I'm going a little bit off script here, but just to express a little bit about some of the parts of the history that I understand. Adam Back has gone on to be the CEO of Blockstream. So that's a service provider in the Bitcoin ecosystem. But I'll move on here. So to implement a distributed timestamp server on a peer-to-peer basis, we will need to use a proof of work system similar to Adam Back's Hashcash. So it's interesting. Yeah, Adam Back, way back before Bitcoin even came out, he had already developed a proof of work system. So rather than newspaper or Usenet posts, we're going to use something similar to Adam Back's proof of work system. Okay, so the proof of work involves scanning for a value that when hashed, such as with SHA-256, the hash begins with a number of 0 bits. The average work required is exponential in the number of 0 bits required and can be verified by executing a single hash. So it can be very difficult to solve for the proof of work, but it's very easy to verify. So for our timestamp network, we implement the proof of work by incrementing a nonce in the block until a value is found that gives the block's hash the required 0 bits. Once the CPU effort has been expended to make it satisfy the proof of work, the block cannot be changed without redoing the work. At later blocks, that chain after it, the work to change the block would include redoing all the blocks after it. So it'd be very work intensive. It's not really feasible to undo the proof of work chain. All right, so the proof of work also solves the problem of determining representation in majority decision making. If the majority were based on one IP address, one vote, it could be subverted by anyone able to allocate many IPs. Proof of work is essentially one CPU, one vote. Very important part of Bitcoin's white paper here. It is expressed by Satoshi Nakamoto that the proof of work is intended to be done by CPUs, not by ASICs, but by something ubiquitous as a general computing processor. It says the majority decision is represented by the longest chain, which has the greatest proof of work effort invested in it. If a majority of CPU power is controlled by honest nodes, the honest chain will grow the fastest and outpace any competing chains. To modify a pass block, an attacker would have to redo the proof of work of the block and all the blocks after it, and then catch up with and surpass the work of the honest nodes. We will show later that the probability of a slower attacker catching up diminishes exponentially as subsequent blocks are added. To compensate for increasing hardware speed and varying interest in running nodes over time, the proof of work difficulty is determined by a moving average targeting an average number of blocks per hour. If they're generated too fast, the difficulty increases. All right, so getting into section 5 is going to be the network section. Sort of near and dear to my interest professionally, as I am a network admin by trade. So I do kind of network stuff. Anyways, the steps to run the network are as follows. And then they have these 6 steps to running the network. New transactions are broadcast to all nodes. Each node collects the new transactions into a block. Each node works on finding a difficult proof of work for its block. When a node finds a proof of work, it broadcasts the block to all nodes. Nodes accept the block only if all transactions in it are valid and not already spent. And finally, in step 6, nodes express their acceptance of the block by working on creating the next block in the chain, using the hash of the accepted block as the previous hash. Nodes always consider the longest chain to be the correct one and will keep working on extending it. Again, that's the 3rd time they've expressed that it is the longest chain that will be the correct chain. And that is how these blockchain projects typically work. So many Bitcoin forks and so many blockchain projects may end up with a fork in the road, a fork in the blockchain, and it will be very easy to count back the longest chain to determine that chain, that particular instance of the blockchain as the correct one. When it can get confusing on which fork might be the correct one, it's, yeah. So, longest chain rules. If 2 nodes broadcast different versions of the next block simultaneously, some nodes may receive one or the other first. In that case, they work on the first one they received, but save the other branch in case it becomes longer. The tie will be broken when the next proof of work is found and one branch becomes longer. The nodes that were working on the other branch will then switch to the longer one. All right. Question, Izzy or Viewpoint, do you think privacy features are going to get pushed out because of regulations? That's a good question, Nick. And I hear that question from other people as well, like Dark Horse. He's keenly interested on regulations and how that can push privacy coins around. So regulations can go both ways. And so my viewpoint is that, the law of the land in the United States is the United States Constitution. There's a stipulation in there, the 4th Amendment is the protection against illegal search and seizure. So when we make regulations, we have to be able to prove that we can protect ourselves against illegal search and seizure. Like one of those ways is that I can lock my glove box, and unless somebody has a reasonable cause, probable cause, then there's no reason they should be fishing around in my glove box, or they should even be able to ask me for a key unless they show me something signed by a judge that it's like, yep, we really think you put something weird in your glove box and we got to see it. So that doesn't just stop at the property in my driveway or inside my house. You could argue that the Bitcoin or that various cryptocurrencies that you keep wherever you keep it, is property. And so people have property rights. So yeah, good question, Nick. Cryptography. I think that's the short and brief answer. And I think debates could wage both ways. But we have to consider human rights. We have to consider people's rights. It's not, money doesn't have to exist for the purpose of surveillance and law enforcement. Money is money. Law enforcement is law enforcement, and it certainly makes sense to follow the money. When you're an investigator. In the case of private money, you'd have to follow other things, other indications of crime being committed. If your next door neighbor one day is just driving, goes from pauper to, okay, goes from a poor dude to a rich dude really quick, people are going to scratch their head and be like, you won the lottery or something changed in your life, and people might look into what happened there. And all I'm saying is there are other ways than private cryptocurrencies to hold up the law. And actually, I would also argue that private cryptocurrencies are needed to uphold the law. And zero knowledge is a big sector, is a narrative. Zero knowledge proofs of assets that's been used by Binance. It was suggested by Binance after the FTX debacle. And so, and oh gosh, crypto.com went right out there and said, well, we're not afraid to show anything. Here, look, here's what we have. And it turns out, a big, like 20% or a big percentage of their holdings were SHIB. And so the problem with that exposure, the problem with that sharing of data is that now, if you want to know where to attack crypto.com, their assets that they hold. Like, okay, if I'm a SHIB whale and I dump all this SHIB, all those crypto.com asset holders that, were holding SHIB on crypto.com are really going to feel the pain. That's going to undermine their business. I think that was a really foolish mistake of crypto.com to just blurt out in that way their holdings. I think there's zero knowledge ways to there are, I think Binance does zero knowledge proofs of their assets, and in such a way that you don't have to tell people specifically what assets you hold. It's just you can prove it. Yeah, so we don't money laundering as a country. Privacy enables that. Oh, that can happen anyways. Money laundering as nations, they just they tag it for one purpose, but then they spend it for another. Misappropriation of funds, and it's classified, and yeah, open source blockchains that are immutable and decentralized. I would say Epicash is an open source blockchain that is immutable and decentralized. You can go out to GitHub/Epicash or github.com/Epicash, and all the source code is right there. We're a fork of Grin. Epicash is a fork of Grin. But anyhow, all right. So yeah, I just finished page 3, and we just talked about the network. And yeah, so getting into page 4 here, I think the last little blurb of network part here in the Bitcoin white paper is new transaction broadcasts do not necessarily need to reach all nodes. As long as they reach many nodes, they will get into the block before long. Block broadcasts are also tolerant of dropped messages. If a node does not receive a block, it will request it when it receives the next block and realize it missed one. So it just talks a little bit about, communication mishaps, and networks happen all the time, and that it wouldn't be a showstopper in the Bitcoin blockchain if that happened. I'm going to mute myself while I drink some water, clear my throat for a second. I just think, so Nick says, yeah, I just think the right to privacy will be abused for illegal purposes if allowed. But you can say that anyways. I can say, like, cash is abused, gold is abused, cryptocurrencies are abused. It's again, it's not the purpose of money to enforce the laws. It's the purpose of law enforcement. When you give law enforcement crutches, such as surveillance money, then that's the only way that they're going to get too dependent on that, and people are going to break the law in other ways, and they're going to get away with it, like they have since the beginning of time. So I don't like apathy. Like, I don't like to come at law enforcement with an approach of apathy. I just think that law enforcement is hard work. I think a lot of career fields are hard work, and if you're in those career fields that take hard work, you need to be a hard worker. We need law enforcement uh, to uh, to do their jobs, and we need people to cooperate with law enforcement because there's heinous crimes that are committed. I'm more concerned. What I like about privacy coins is that they prevent other heinous crimes that aren't labeled as crimes, but since they benefit the corporatocracy of knowing how to better target you as a consumer, then they get a pass. So, so yeah, I just think that there's just as much abuse that would happen if we lost privacy rights. There would be more egregious abuse, and they probably wouldn't even tag it as a law that's being broken. They being the corporatocracy intertwined with governments that has steered away from a government by the people for the people and more of a government by corporatocracies who go to the lobby, have their lobbyists go in with their vast sums of money. So there's a thing known as the prisoner's dilemma, and money has evolved in such a way that it solved various problems. If back when you would trade shells and collectibles, you ended up in a situation where you had tribes trading these things between each other because one tribe could hunt a variety of animal that was in season parts of the year, and another tribe would hunt some other animal that's available in other parts of the year. But by having this trade between each other, they could have more consistent food throughout the year by having this type of money that they could exchange between each other. And eventually that turned to minting coins, and then that turned into paper money. Okay. But now we have centralized banks, and so that's kind of like the next big step in money. And the problem with that is we have to trust these centralized banks. They print a lot of money, which is resulting in inflation, which is another way of taxing people. And so you end up where we have this prisoner's dilemma that needs to be solved, and that is, how do you solve for the stronger prisoner in this situation? So the idea is we're all prisoners on this earth. We're all prisoners together. And we all compete for scarce resources. I don't know if you can hear my dog in the background. Sorry about that. And so if money is power, and you have you have the capability to print infinite money, you have the ability to be infinitely powerful. In that situation, the centralized banks represent the stronger prisoner, and the rest of people on planet Earth are just getting wrecked over the course of centuries. And so when you look at the very first blockchain, very first block of Bitcoin that was mined, there was a message in there, and it was an excerpt. It was a headline talking about a bank that had just gone under, a government bailout of a bank. And that tells you so much about the importance of cryptocurrencies, and the fundamentals that come behind cryptocurrencies, which include privacy. So not only do we need to be able to have private money, or have money that is created by people and not centralized banking institutions, but we need to be able to have money that's private. So I'm going to get back into this Bitcoin white paper, but kind of steered off course here. But That's fine. I love the comments here. All right, so I see. Yeah, good discussion between folks in the chat group. It's great. So incentive. So moving into page 4 here. Let's see. Oof, been going for about 35 minutes, way behind schedule. So I'm going to knock out this page here. Incentive. So we've talked about, the problem, how the problem can be solved by a combination of proof of work and timestamp servers, and how the network works. That's a fun sequence of word, network works. But how the network functions, and those 6 things that are required, and kind of the process-oriented nature of transactions broadcasting to all the nodes and how the nodes talk to each other. So very considerate and detailed explanation of how this works so far. But why are we going to do this? Like, why are people going to come and participate? Well, it would be great if those miners got a piece of that reward, and I think that's what they're going to talk a little bit about the incentive here. So, by convention, the first transaction in a block is a special transaction that starts a new coin owned by the creator of the block. This adds an incentive for nodes to support the network and provides a way to initially distribute coins into circulation, since there is no central authority to issue them. So this is where the coins from. The coins don't come from a central bank. They don't come from a central business or some central place you can go and knock on their door or firebomb their building. It is the distributed, decentralized network of and process of this blockchain that emits these coins. Okay, so the steady addition of a constant of amount of new coins is analogous to gold miners expending resources to add gold to circulation. In our case, it is CPU time and electricity that is expended. The incentive can also be funded with transaction fees. If the output value of a transaction is less than its input value, the difference is a transaction fee that is added to the incentive value of the block containing the transaction. Once a predetermined number of coins have entered circulation, the incentive can transition entirely to a transaction fee and can be completely inflation-free. The incentive may help encourage nodes to stay honest. If a greedy attacker is able to assemble more CPU power than all the honest nodes, he would have to choose between using it to defraud people by stealing back his payments or using it to generate new coins. He ought to find it more profitable to play by the rules, such rules that favor him with more new coins than everybody else combined, than to undermine the system and the validity of his own wealth. All right. Number 7, reclaiming disk space. So here they're acknowledging the importance of disk space in all this, which is interesting since it's estimated Bitcoin will eventually be several terabytes as we speak. It's getting close to about half a terabyte. But we'll get into Satoshi Nakamoto's description of how they reclaim disk space. Once the latest transaction in a coin is buried under enough blocks, the spent transactions before it can be discarded to save disk space. To facilitate this without breaking the block's hash, transactions are hashed in a Merkle tree, with the only root included in the block's hash. Old blocks can be compacted by stubbing off branches of the tree. The interior hashes do not need to be stored. A block header with no transactions would be about 80 bytes. If we suppose blocks are generated every 10 minutes, 80 bytes times 6 times 24 times 365 would be about 4.2 megabytes per year, with computer systems typically selling with 2 gigabytes of RAM as of 2008. That's funny. And Moore's law predicting current growth of 1.2 gigabyte per year, storage should not be a problem even if the block headers must be kept in memory. Wow, what a gross miscalculation that was by Satoshi, because we all know how big, fat, and bloated the Bitcoin blockchain is. But but maybe that's a good problem to have. That's an awful lot of use. But look at all the other competitors coming up behind it with, Epic Cash can do, I think something like, at the moment, like 4 or 5 times the scalable throughput that Bitcoin can do. And that's going to get a lot faster too. Because Bitcoin kind of stays stagnant. They don't really change. That might be their feature in some ways, and to other people in other ways, that's a bug. All right, Dark Horse is in here. Excuse my my occasional spoonerisms and loss for words. Now I know how. Now I have a lot of stamina envy of Dark Horse. I don't. It seems like he goes for like 6 to 8 hours, probably 24 hours a day. He's just going, going, going. But mad respect for the people that do this a lot longer than I do. But if you're just joining in, I am reading from the Bitcoin white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto. I believe this came out in 2009. If anyone knows for sure when the actual Bitcoin development really began in earnest and started taking place, if that was in 2008, sound off in the chat. That would be cool to know. I'm not really sure on that myself. I've always said 2009, and I thought it was kind of like later in 2009 when they kind of went mainnet. Yeah. So hopefully that's not just me that gets tongue-tied every once in a while. There's certain words are harder than others. But yeah, so we just covered the reclaiming disk space, which good thing that was a short part in the white paper, and they didn't spend a whole lot of time on that because it looks like they made a rough estimation that block headers would tally up to something like 4.2 megabytes per year, and the Bitcoin blockchain size is getting close to half a terabyte, guys. And estimated that it will reach into 6 to 7 terabytes at some point. Maybe by the time they are fully emitted in the year 2041, which I know because they say that explicitly in the Epicache white paper several times about 2041 being that magical year when that final supply of 21 million is reached in both Epicache and Bitcoin. So moving on here into page 5, we're going to look at the simplified payment verification. All right. All right. It is possible to verify payments without running a full network node. A user only needs to keep a copy of the block headers of the longest proof of work chain, which he can get by querying network nodes until he's convinced he has the longest chain, and obtain the Merkle branch linking the transaction to the block it's timestamped in. He can't check the transaction for himself, but by linking it to a place in the chain, he can see that a network node has accepted it, and blocks added after it further confirm the network has accepted it. And once again, thanks so much for the kind words, Donna, the mother trucker, and thanks, folks, for the gifts and the roses and tuning in. Wow, fantastic. So keeping on here with the simplified payment verification and the Satoshi white paper, in the Bitcoin white paper, they illustrate the longest proof of work chain, where there's a block header, you have the previous hash, there's a nonce, the Merkle root, it gets hashed, and the previous transactions hash are mixed in with it, added with another nonce, and it just carries on like that. And so carrying on here, it says, as such, the verification is reliable as long as honest nodes control the network, but is more vulnerable if the network is overpowered by an attacker. And again, there's common themes that run through this white paper. They say certain things over and over again. They really drill into us that the longest chain in the block, in the amongst the nodes, is the chain that wins. It's the chain that all the nodes agree is the winner. That's just how the protocol works. And now they're talking about honest nodes and attacking nodes. So while network nodes can verify transactions for themselves, the simplified method can be fooled by an attacker's fabricated transactions for as long as the attacker can continue to overpower the network. One strategy to protect against this would be to accept alerts from network nodes when they detect an invalid block, prompting the user's software to download the full block and alerted transactions to confirm the inconsistency. Businesses that receive frequent payments will probably still want to run their own nodes for more independent security and quicker verification. All right, so a little bit about, they talked about networks, reclaiming, incentives, uh, reclaiming disk space, simplified payment verification, and that business owners may want to run their own full node to be more secure. All right, so getting into section 9 here, combining and splitting value. I'll just check the comments real quick and take a drink of water. And I'm back. All right, so combining and splitting value. Although it would be possible to handle coins individually, it would be unwieldy to make a separate transaction for every cent in a transfer. To allow value to be split and combined, transactions contain multiple inputs and outputs. Normally, there will be a single input from a larger previous transaction or multiple inputs combining smaller amounts, and at most, two outputs, one for the payment and one for returning the change, if any, back to the sender. So you can always have a vast array of inputs, and those get loaded into what we call the mempool. Another interesting point in this white paper, there's certain verbology and phraseology that taxonomy even that we come to into our vernacular. These words that we use, like a mempool, like you'll hear hear people say a Coinbase, and do a word search in the white paper for Bitcoin for things like Coinbase um, and what was I just saying? Yeah, but do a word search for Coinbase, and you won't find it. It's not in the original white paper. Um, uh, I don't know if I can't remember if UTXO is even in here, which is interesting. So because we all use those terms so often. October 31st, 2008. So that would be when Bitcoin really began development. What a cool thing for it to be on Halloween. But it's probably, my guess is that it wasn't really started in the U.S. I don't know. That's too much debating. And let's get back into this white paper. Okay, but I just think that's a really interesting part that everybody should understand. That we all go to send our transactions on these cryptocurrencies. They get loaded into mempool was the thing I was trying to remember. So yeah, but there's no mention of a mempool in here. But that's typically how it's expressed. Is this kind of pool where we all put our transactions, and the transactions are there awaiting for the next block to be solved. And so those inputs go into there, and when it's solved, those outputs, what is you finally end up with the two outputs, right? So all these inputs go in, but what you get out is you get the payment that was intended to go to the recipient, and whatever change to go back to the sender of that cryptocurrency. So just really like something that kind of clicks and makes a lot of sense in UTXO transactions. So yes, moving into page 6. And I don't know about y'all, but I feel a lot better with y'all being here watching me because, man, I just feel this energy, and I feel like I'm not just talking to myself, but hopefully some people are getting some stuff out of this Bitcoin white paper reading. Maybe some things we don't always think about, and it can be different to hear it as audible rather than just reading it quietly. So, and I'm going to be doing this. So I'm going to be reading some various white papers. Excuse my clicking. I'm going to be doing some white paper readings. I've read the Epicash white paper a couple times. This is my first time doing a live stream where I'm reading the Bitcoin white paper. Right on, brother. Thank you so much. That's refreshing. So yeah, it's so I'm using TikTok live, what do they call it? Live Studio. And I like this because it's like a cleaner interface. It feels easier to interact. And hi, Bruce. This is so cool, guys. Yeah, so I really like this interface. It's a little I don't think it really shows me everything that's going on with people who might have tuned in. So, but I'm learning and it's great. I really do like this interface. But we're about 2/3 through this Bitcoin white paper, and wow, number 10, the perfect number. We all know number 10 is the perfect number. Come on, y'all. I mean, that's what they say anyways, and I'm sort of fond being an IT nerd a little bit. 1 0. Can it get any better? But guess what number 10 is? If you can, I don't know how small it is on screens at home, or some people might be watching this on bigger screens, but or how viewable this white paper might be as I'm reading it aloud. Some people might actually be able to see it if maybe if they're on a big 50-inch screen like I am. But so this number 10 is privacy, guys. Like the most important, number in this whole thing. But privacy is mentioned. Now, granted, they only give it 2 paragraphs, but it is a consideration. It is expressed as something to be expressed, to something to be considered, to cogitate on, to be yeah. So let's get into wrapping up this Bitcoin white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto. The traditional banking model achieves a level of privacy by limiting access to information to the parties involved and the trusted third party. The necessity to announce all transactions publicly precludes this method, but privacy can still be maintained by breaking the flow of information in another place, by keeping public keys anonymous. The public can see that someone is sending an amount to someone else, but without information linking the transaction to anyone. This is similar to the level of information released by stock exchanges, where the time and size of an individual trades, the tape, is made public, but without telling who the parties were. As an additional firewall, a new key pair should be used for each transaction to keep them from being linked to a common owner. Some linking is still unavoidable with multi-input transactions, which necessarily reveal that their inputs were owned by the same owner. The risk is that if the owner of a key is revealed, linking could reveal other transactions that belong to the same owner. Excuse me. Sorry about that, just had to clear my throat. So gosh, traditional privacy model. I remember actually reading this and enjoying this flowchart that they use to express to illustrate a traditional privacy model compared to what Bitcoin presents as a new privacy model. So in the traditional privacy model, identities are connected to transactions, then go through a trusted third party to a counterparty, and then there's a wall between all that and the public. So it's walled off, but we know there have been data breaches, and they don't use elliptic curve cryptography to hide certain information. It's not baked into their protocol. But in the new privacy protocol, you have identities are walled off transactions which are public. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this. I'll probably speak a little bit more to this in future readings because I do remember enjoying looking at this. It's like the positioning of where that gets walled off, where this privacy layer gets separated in their protocols is an interesting consideration, and something that I would like to delve into more. But suffice it to say, we know about organizations such as Chainalysis, that they do data mining. There are banned Bitcoin addresses because of linkages to various crimes, and this can be a problem for fungibility. You can end up with tainted bitcoins. This is widely acknowledged by various references. They're actually referenced in the Epic Cash white paper and various reliable sources or respected authorities in the realm of, say, cybersecurity who acknowledge the problems with Bitcoin's lack of fungibility, which is inherently due to the problems with the privacy model. Enough on that. Moving on to calculations. We're going to have some math. I'm sorry. Yep. All right. Dark Horse says, yep. Oh, Nick's getting some pizza. After white paper movie night, watch The Big Short. Actually, you know, Nick's got me wanting to go watch The Big Short again. And I just started watching Vikings on Netflix, or Vikings Valhalla, I think it's called on Netflix. So, but I think, you know, you go back and you watch certain movies with different eyeballs. And there's certain movies that, like, I just like to watch every once in a while. And okay, some of them are cheesy westerns, or not cheesy western. I mean, it's Tombstone, guys. Tombstone is just so good. But Gangs of New York, the scene where the two fire engines pull up to a burning apartment building just reminds me so much of the SEC. Maybe fighting a little bit with the CFTC. I can imagine that being a meme, you know, where you could, yeah. But definitely The Big Short is. I can tell Nick loves The Big Short. I think he uses it as a reference. They actually own and sell a CRM system for data mining, Web3, and blockchains. Right? And I think another narrative in Web3 is, oh, there you go. Tell me it's Bitcoin and the Bart Simpson pattern with his head, right? Learn to earn, just join. I think that's where I saw the Bart Simpson trading analysis. But yeah, Web3 narratives, like one of those being like owning your personal data, owning your data, and engaging in web activities in such a way that it's your data. It's always your data, and you can benefit from how others may use your data. So CRM, that's a term. So customer relation management or something like that. I've also seen it expressed as crew resource management, which is more like airlines and stuff. But yeah, customer resource management, right? Am I getting that CRM acronym right? But yeah, lots of big things coming in Web3 and big data, and you know that's a narrative that people are paying close attention to. All right, calculations, and we consider the scenario of an attacker trying to generate an alternate chain faster. Let me start over. We consider the scenario of an attacker trying to generate an alternate chain faster than the honest chain. Even if this is accomplished, it does not throw the system open to arbitrary changes, such as creating value out of thin air or taking money that never belonged to the attacker. Nodes are not going to accept an invalid transaction as payment, and honest nodes will never accept a block containing them. An attacker can only try to change one of his own transactions to take back money he recently spent. And as Bitcoin has gotten more valuable, those kinds of attacks are more damaging. But also as the chain has become more secure, it's much more expensive and less likely. So the race between the honest chain and an attacker chain can be characterized as a binomial random walk. The success event is the honest chain being extended by one block, increasing its lead by one. And the failure event is the attacker's chain being extended by one block, reducing the gap by one. The probability of an attacker catching up from a given deficit is analogous to a gambler's ruin problem. Suppose a gambler with unlimited credits starts at a deficit and plays potentially an infinite number of trials to try to reach break even. We can calculate that the probability he ever reaches break even, or that an attacker even catches up, with the honest chain as follows. P being the probability that an honest node finds the next block, Q being the probability that the attacker finds the next block, and QZ, the probability the attacker will ever catch up from block Z's behind. So there's some math. Given our assumption that probability that P is greater than Q, the probability drops exponentially as the number of blocks the attacker has to catch up with increases. With the odds against him, if he doesn't make a lucky lunge forward early on, his chances become vanishingly small as he falls further behind. We now consider how long the recipient of a new transaction needs to wait before being sufficiently certain the sender can't change the transaction. We assume the sender is an attacker who wants to make the recipient believe he paid him for a while, then switch it to pay back to himself after some time has passed. The receiver will be alerted when that happens, but the sender hopes it will be too late. The receiver generates a new key pair and gives the public key to the sender shortly before signing. This prevents the sender from preparing a chain of blocks ahead of time by working on it continuously until he is lucky enough to get far enough ahead that then executing the transaction at that moment. Once the transaction is sent, the dishonest sender starts working in secret on a parallel chain containing an alternate version of his transaction. The recipient waits until the transaction has been added to a block and Z blocks have been linked after it. He doesn't know the exact number of progress the attacker has made, but assuming the honest blocks took the average expected time per block, the attacker's potential progress will be a Poisson distribution with expected value, wavelength, or no, what's that symbol, lambda, equals Z multiplied by, oh my gosh, math terminology. Z, the product of Z, oh my gosh. The product of Z by the quotient of Q divided by P. Something like that, okay? To get the probability, the attacker could still catch up now. We multiply the Poisson density for each amount of progress he could have made by probability he could catch up from that point. Oh my gosh, and then you've got this is some calculus stuff I never got into. The infinite sum k equals 0, k, z, rearranging, so this is like, yeah. You know what, I'm gonna get better at reading some of this. It's not a derivative. So rearranging to avoid summing the infinite tail of the distribution. Converting into C code, include math.h, double attackers, success probability, double Q, integer Z, and then, yeah, so lambda, I'm pretty sure that crazy looking little wavelength symbol I thought is actually lambda. Exponent, yep, so hey, I knew one of the terms, lambda. And I'm pretty sure sum is that big, crazy, weird looking E thing. Okay, so there's my math ignorance. Running some results, we can see the probability drop off exponentially with Z. So what they're expressing there is that, you know, and in experience in various readings, what I've gathered is the old 51% attack, where someone dominates proof of work, and you know, it's doable for so long before the rest of the network. Yeah, that amount of mining power is expensive. So yeah. All right. And now we're in the conclusion, and the last page is just some references. So in conclusion, we have proposed a system for electronic transactions without relying on trust. We started with the usual framework of coins made from digital signatures, which provides a strong control of ownership, but is incomplete without a way to prevent double spending. To solve this, we proposed a peer-to-peer network using proof of work to record a public history of transactions that quickly becomes computationally impractical for an attacker to change if honest nodes control a majority of CPU power. There's that 51% requirement for honest nodes. The network is robust in its unstructured simplicity. Nodes work all at once with little coordination. They do not need to be identified, since messages are not routed to any particular place and only need to be delivered on a best effort basis. Nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the proof of work chain as a proof of what happened while they were gone. They vote with their CPU power, expressing their acceptance of valid blocks by working on extending them and rejecting invalid blocks by refusing to work on them. Any needed rules and incentives can be enforced with this consensus mechanism. This is the proof of work consensus mechanism, is how it's frequently called. All right, Donna, the mother trucker, says she's done for the night. Awesome, and really appreciate Donna in our Telegram chats and sending out the links and letting people know that I went live here to read the Bitcoin white paper and the 106 diamonds. Thank you so much. The roses, amazing. Really appreciate y'all. We've got views. I got some new followers. We got people in the live chat. Ashjan says hi. Hi, Ashjan. I appreciate you so much and all the participation here. So now, that pretty much concludes the live stream. I appreciate y'all tapping the little screen there. That gets me likes when you tap the screen. So that's cool. I don't know. That helps the algorithm probably, as they say. So yeah, that was enlightening for me after reading the Bitcoin white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto. All right. And, you know, I think I'll probably do this again earlier in the day, different time zones, you know, to get coverage in different parts of the world. Yep. Likes fast pace. So the only problem, oh, you know what? I just realized I can probably tune in. I'm gonna see if I can tune in on my device here. If this will open this on my phone. Yeah, I can see myself, and now I can give myself my own self some likes. Ha ha! So cool. Okay, so I just gave myself some likes. Ooh, but now I'm hearing myself. Ooh, that's not fun. Okay. So yeah, that kind of is kind of neat and works. But yeah, I'm gonna look a little bit more at some of the diagrams in here and get better at speaking to some of the diagrams. You know, highly recommend that people read various white papers out there. And this is a good way to kind of force myself to do it. Although I do like to read quietly to myself. I kind of get more introspective. I end up spending a lot of time on Google and get distracted from just reading straight through. But it's a good practice to do that, where you read straight through a paper with as little interruptions as possible. But it's also just fun to when you find things that you don't really understand and you want to go and dig deeper on it. So recommend that to anyone. This Bitcoin white paper is out there for anyone to read on bitcoin.org/bitcoin.pdf. There's a lot of other really good information out there. If you haven't read a paper by Nick Szabo, that's Nick Szabo. Szabo is spelled Szabo. He wrote a paper called Shelling Out. If you just Google like Nick shelling out Bitcoin or Nakamoto, it's actually in the Nakamoto like Institute or something like that. It's a free paper. It's a great read. I spent a couple days reading that, taking my time and reading it. Yeah. Awesome stuff. So if there's nothing further, guys, I'm gonna go. I think think I saw some good suggestions on other things to do this evening, but let me see. Movie night, um, pizza sounds good, and yeah, life is good. All right, y'all. That's gonna do it for me. Just a little bit over an hour, and there were some nice little discussions in there too. So I'm right at an hour and 10 minutes. Oh, an hour and 16 minutes. I just realized the timer on here. Good night, Nick Cryptography. Love all you do. Um, love the community on TikTok. Um, it's a great resource and application for people. So yeah. All right, folks. I'm closing this down, ending the live. Good night.